A quick note before we begin. As I've already joked about, I've been putting out a decent number of what one might consider negative videos recently, but going into this one, I'd like you to consider it more along the lines of constructive criticism. This isn't about berating Nintendo for doing something bad. It's less from the perspective of a customer who wants something, and more from the perspective of a person who's interested in business and wants to see Nintendo reach their fullest potential. With that said, thank you and enjoy the video. Ziploc bag! Hello, you wonderful, beautiful, glorious people! Today I'm here to talk about older games, or more accurately, the relative lack thereof on the Switch. On one fateful day in May of 2018, Nintendo made the baffling announcement that the hotly awaited Switch Virtual Console wasn't a thing, and wouldn't be a thing ever. This news came as quite a shock. I was displeased, to say the least. They insisted that their online service would be the future of playing classic Nintendo games, though of course they didn't specify what that would look like, instead leaving us to slowly piece together a picture over the course of years, which seems to be something of a theme for Nintendo Switch Online. Even though technically we still don't have a complete picture, we've got enough to sort of make out what the picture is. SNES games on NSO have proven that the service doesn't stop with NES, suggesting that they'll continue to bring new platforms over time. How many platforms? Will we have to pay more for them? We don't know yet, but now we can see what they meant when they said that the Virtual Console was dead and that NSO was the way forward. I will say, before launching fully into this, that we really have no idea how this classic game service will look by the end of the Switch's life. The offerings could be meager, or Nintendo could end up giving us games all the way up through the Wii, all for an amazing price, or technically they could even change their minds later and give us some different service, even bringing back something like the Virtual Console. We just don't know. That said though, I do have issues with the system they're laying out, or rather, their current execution of that system and unwillingness to get it rolling at a faster rate. By drip-feeding us these games and leaving us wondering what will come next and when, they're missing out on a crucial opportunity to accomplish so much more than just getting us to pay for NSO memberships. As an actual businessman with, naturally, a lot of experience running an international multi-billion-dollar corporation, I think what Nintendo's doing, or not doing, is bad business, and here is why it could end up hurting them in the long run. So, one question that's been plaguing us for ages now is, why did Nintendo decide to get rid of the Virtual Console? I mean, it was easy money. Slap a bunch of ROMs on the eShop with whatever price tag and people will eat them up. They ate them up on the Wii and the Wii U and the 3DS, so why not the Switch? In fact, as I've talked about many times now, the Switch is a better platform for classic games than any of Nintendo's previous systems. Handheld play gives us a whole new reason to play anything. And furthermore, a lot of people are buying Switches and wanting to play classic games who haven't owned any Nintendo system post GameCube until now. They've never even had access to the Virtual Console. The Switch was the time for Nintendo to double down on their classic digital offerings. But they didn't. They chose this exact time to throw the whole thing out the window and bring in a subscription service. And the why of this has made my brain hurt. Why would Nintendo prefer us paying a relatively low yearly fee to play these games rather than buying them outright? I mean, one entire year of Nintendo Switch Online costs as much as only 2 N64 games on the Virtual Console. I share a family plan with other people and only pay about the price of one single SNES game. A year! Why on earth would Nintendo prefer this over charging individually? I mean, I've seen people's Wii and Wii U libraries. They went nuts for those old games. They bought them up left and right. I'm 100% certain that would be the case here too, if not even more so. Nintendo would probably make $1 billion overnight if they launched a full-fat Virtual Console service. It doesn't stop there though. I've also wondered why, even if they are set on giving us a subscription service, are they rolling it out so slowly? If they want to sweeten the pot and they're going to end up giving us a bunch of games anyway, what's been taking so long? Why wouldn't they want to give us at least a sizable selection of platforms and games right out of the gate to get us on board? Why are we sitting here wishing beyond all wishing that we could play games we were able to purchase digitally generations ago? These questions kept me up many a night. I couldn't get past the disparate pricing scheme, the lost money potential, the unnecessarily slow rollout. None of it made sense. What could Nintendo be thinking? But then, one day, probably while doing something mundane, like brushing my teeth or eating a sandwich or something, it hit me. All at once, I understood completely. As is the case with literally 100% of the things that come out of my mouth, I could be wrong, but at the very least, this is the way I see it. Nintendo turned to a subscription-based service because they knew they could only sell us old games so many times. Reggie Fils-Aimé even said in an interview that they were very much aware of the fact that people with sizable virtual console libraries were going to be nervous heading over to the Switch. Nintendo has the capacity to do some baffling stuff that draws a very solid line between themselves and the rest of the gaming world, but even they didn't want the bad PR that would come from making us rebuy everything every time we get a new system. I mean, you can only shun standard customer-friendly practices for so long before you start looking like a huge jerk. Xbox has been pushing backwards compatibility like crazy, and when I first got my PS4, I booted up the shop and it was like, hey, we can see you got Unfinished Swan on your PS3. The game got ported to PS4, so you want to download it again? And I was like, what? Like for free? And it was like, yeah. So I did. Simple as that. Simple as that. As an aside, someone bought that game for me, and I don't know who it was, but if it was you, thank you, and I love you. Anyway, it seems Nintendo didn't want to be seen as too greedy, so they decided to scale things back. They sort of skirted the line with the Wii U. We were able to transfer all of our Wii games to our Wii U's, but if we wanted to play outside of the Wii menu and with extra features, we had to pay $1 or $2 per title. There was always the chance that Nintendo would do that again with the Switch, and that was how they were going to keep legacy content moving forward indefinitely. But the problem with that system is, well, where's the money in that? Sure, there will always be new customers buying old games, but for people like me, who will probably keep buying Nintendo systems forever and forever enjoying those old games, a few bucks per generation ain't gonna cut it for Nintendo, especially if they have to put in the effort to port everything over every single time. So what was their answer to all this? How did they solve this conundrum of making enough money on the games while dealing with all these issues of ownership? Simple. Don't let us own them anymore. Switch Online may seem affordable compared to the cost of buying these games separately, but we're probably going to be playing these games forever, right? I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. I will pay for the duration of my Switch's life. Then the next system will come along, and I'll probably pay every year for that one too. And the next one. And the next one. This subscription model is a part of Nintendo's long-term plan. This is the only way that they can monetize these games in perpetuity without dealing with all the ownership and transferring and pricing issues. Also, more and more third-party companies are doing their own re-releases for their classic games, so more and more Nintendo is needing to focus on monetizing their own legacy content. If they can't make a bunch of money from virtual console releases of Sonic and Mega Man anymore, they need to double down on the old Marios and Zeldas and whatnot. And as for why they're drip-feeding us platforms and games, my only guess is that they like to generate hype around each release. They did it with the Virtual Console in the past, and now they're doing it again. Instead of just giving us a big fat library to enjoy all at once, they're once again looking at that long term. If the service carries over flawlessly to the next system without the need for re-releases, which I certainly hope is the case, then they've essentially got one final chance to hype up these releases. This may be the last time they'll be able to give us 2 or 3 games and have us playing them together and tweeting about them and stuff. It could also be their last chance to give us a service that's actively growing, which is enticing in its own kind of way, versus a service that's great, but most of the cards are already on the table, so it's easier to decide whether or not it's worth subscribing to. If all of this is true, and now we know why Nintendo is doing what they're doing, then I understand it. Whereas before I was baffled by their decisions, now I can say that I get it. And in fact, I'll even commend them for having the wisdom to plan for the future. So many giant game companies are chasing short-term profits so hard that they're shooting themselves in the foot in the long run. They're giving up the potential to make billions of dollars every year forever because they would rather have an extra $1 billion now. All the investors and big executives know that it doesn't matter if they burn every last bridge they've got because they can just jump ship the second theirs starts to go down and move on to something else, to egregiously mix metaphors. But not Nintendo. For them, slow and steady wins the race. They want to make money now and decades from now. It's good business for sure. However, I still believe that they are doing some foot shooting of their own, specifically by taking so long to roll out old content and relying almost entirely on this currently very limited subscription service. See, this is pure speculation, but from where I'm standing, sometimes it feels like Nintendo likes to sell us old games for 2 main reasons. 1, to make some money, of course, and 2, to cater to nostalgia and keep old fogies like myself interested in their systems. I, on the other hand, believe that when it comes to old games, nothing And I mean nothing is more important than aiding in the creation of new fans in order to drive future sales. More than anything, these games are marketing tools. Of course, it would be ridiculous to assume Nintendo didn't think this as well, at least to some extent. The subscription model very much supports this idea, but their actions have communicated that those other two things might be higher on the priorities list, and I honestly believe that having access to old games is more important than they realize. And I must tell you now, you might have clicked on this video thinking I was going to talk about classic games exclusively, probably up through N64, maybe throwing GameCube on there for good measure. I mean, who doesn't want GameCube games on NSO? But from here on out, when I say old games, I mean essentially any game that was released before the Switch. This is a much bigger issue than just letting me play Super Mario 64 for the 89th time. I've already talked a bunch about how I'm 100% in favor of any and all remasters and ports, pretty much always, because the more chances people have to enjoy any given game, the better. And my opinion here is along the same lines, but to a much greater degree. Nintendo is an old company, and they rely on their pre-established IPs more than any other, hands down. Lots of companies like to iterate, obviously, but Nintendo's pool of properties is wider than most, and not to mention deeper too, extending further back in time. Some series get ignored for a while when Nintendo doesn't know what to do with them, of course, but it feels like nothing is ever forgotten completely. Once it's in the Nintendo family, it is there to stay. And there's always a chance for a sequel, or at the very least, a reference or something in a different game, even if it's years later. Nothing is more important to Nintendo than maintaining and utilizing that pool of IPs, both legacy and contemporary. Keeping pre-existing fans happy is obviously one of their goals. They know that I love Super Metroid, so they added Super Metroid to the NSO library, and that's great. But catering to my nostalgia can't be all they do. Creating new fans of their various IPs is also of utmost importance. It cannot be overstated how many Switch owners are new to the world of Nintendo or returning after many generations, and that number is only going to keep growing and growing the older the system gets. Another significant demographic is younger folks who just haven't been alive long enough to play through a lot of Nintendo's history. Maybe their gaming journeys started with the Wii, or even with the Wii U. My point is that a tremendous amount of the Switch's install base has yet to be exposed to the vast majority of Nintendo's catalog. These people are thirsty for new games. They want to know what they've been missing. And what do these people have? Super Metroid? And a decent little chunk of NES and Super NES games? Hey, you've got some good legacy content in there. The first few Marios and Zeldas, some Kirbys. I absolutely will not downplay the importance of these titles. But at the same time, there's still only one chunk of the bigger picture. Like I said, it's not just about having access to the super old stuff. Those classics do act as very good entry points for their respective franchises, especially considering they're all available through NSO, but you could still argue that plenty of the Switch's new first-party games serve as perfectly acceptable entry points on their own. There are tons of people for whom Breath of the Wild was their first Zelda game. Okay, but what about Metroid? Oh, well, that's what Super Metroid is for, and it's on NSO. No, I mean Metroid Prime. There's a ton of hype surrounding Metroid Prime 4, and I'm sure a whole lot of people would love to see what the fuss is about. But are they really going to want to start with the fourth game in the series? Because right now, that's their only choice. Or, you know, it will be their only choice. Miyamoto has been teasing us with Pikmin 4 for ages now, but let's say, for example, it gets a surprise reveal and release tomorrow. Tomorrow, we've got Pikmin 4 right on the Switch. There it is. Wow. Another 4, huh? I guarantee plenty of people would watch the trailer and be like, wow, that looks pretty cool. Where can I buy the first 3 games so I can see if I like the series or so I can learn about the world? Well, the answer to their question would be, you can't. At least not on Switch. Oh, look, another one, Luigi's Mansion 3. Game looks amazing. People are super excited for it, but 3? I don't want to start with 3. What if I don't even like the gameplay? That'd be $60 down the toilet. I know what many of you are probably saying right now. Those old games still exist. There are still ways to play them. The first 2 Luigi's Mansion games are on the 3DS, and you can buy Wii copies of Pikmin 1 and 2 and Metroid Prime Trilogy, and most of these games are available on the Wii through backwards compatibility with GameCube games. But those aren't the Switch. We're talking about people who have Switches here, not 3DSs and Wii U's and Wii's and GameCubes. We're talking about the thing that's currently popular, that people are currently playing, that's currently selling. The idea that a person should just go get it on another platform is It's absurd in this day and age. Things used to be that way. You just had to have the system to play the games. But now that's entirely unnecessary. It's just not something that we have to deal with anymore. And the fact that Nintendo isn't capitalizing hardcore on this is the issue here. The fact that they've got games coming out on the Switch from pre-established series, some of which are decades old, and they're not giving us all the ability to easily play the previous entries on our Switches, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And games currently on the Switch or coming soon to Switch are one thing, but Nintendo likes to look at the long term, right? Well, what if some years from now they finally decide to make a Paper Mario game like the first two? Well, then, why aren't they doing their best to turn people into Paper Mario fans right now? What if they decide to make an F-Zero game? Do they really expect us to become fans based on the SNES version with no X or GX to get us hooked on the mega fast 3D formula? I could do this for countless old series. If Nintendo loves to lean so hard on their old games, and you never know when they're gonna return to an old series, why aren't they trying harder to expose us to every single one of those series? Other companies waste no time porting and remastering their old games, and none of this "we only do classic games" nonsense. Doesn't matter if it's 20 years old or 2. If a new console comes along, they go, "Hey, I bet people who own this new console still want to play those old games." I sense another objection coming from many of you. You might be accusing me of just plain being impatient. I even admitted earlier that we don't know what Nintendo's plans are, and in the next Direct, they could announce that every Nintendo system ever is coming to NSO. Maybe the strongly rumored Metroid Prime trilogy was real after all, and it's coming soon. Maybe Pikmin 1 and 2 remakes are coming next year. Well, to that I say, at the risk of sounding like a spoiled brat, that's not fast enough. In the words of the late Dolores O'Riordan, time is ticking out. Oh, whoa, when I made that reference, I didn't even remember about the line about playing games. That's awesome. Love the cranberries. Anyway, I know I may sound impatient, but I honestly feel that making fans of old series is something that should be happening constantly. It's such an important part of their business model that not capitalizing on it at all times is to constantly be missing opportunities and thus losing out on money in the long run. Some people are only going to be receptive to getting into some new series or other for a short window. Some people need the circumstances to be just right. If this isn't clear yet, there are just so many different kinds of people with all different tastes and playing games in different circumstances, and to give access to a very wide range of old titles is to cover all your bases and ensure that the highest number of people possible are going to be converted into fans. Also, I've been talking about the more notable series here, you know, Luigi's Mansion, Animal Crossing, and that kind of thing, but Nintendo's got loads and loads of other smaller and more obscure IPs that they're not even thinking about right now, but could obviously use the exposure as well. The more time that ticks by without them being readily available, the more opportunities that are missed. I've maintained for years now that the most damaging thing the Wii U did to Nintendo wasn't selling badly. The money they lost, it probably made the investors pretty upset, but it wasn't anything they couldn't recover from. Much, much worse was the fact that for several years, at least 4.5 during the life of the Wii U, but potentially more considering the flagging latter years of the Wii, for all those years, Nintendo was not a relevant brand. It wasn't reaching people. It wasn't exciting people outside of the Nintendo fan sphere. Very, very few kids were bothering with Nintendo and instead latching onto other platforms and games that did a much better job catering to their tastes. And here's my question. How many of those kids do you think went on to discover Nintendo later with the Switch? Oh, I'm sure there are some, but I'm willing to bet a sizable portion of them were once receptive to becoming Nintendo fans, but have missed their window. Very often, much of what we enjoy is established early in childhood, and here we've got a giant chunk of kids within a several-year span that got into Minecraft or Call of Duty or whatever and won't ever look back. To them, Nintendo isn't a household name. It's not something they grew up with or have any sort of nostalgia for whatsoever. Also often, what a kid is exposed to depends a lot on what their parents expose them to. And those kids may eventually grow up to have their own kids that also don't really care for Nintendo. I know I'm getting extremely speculative here, but you get the point I'm trying to make. When you're actually talking about the long term, like the actual, real, long term, you can't count out any outcome. In an economy of scale, you can't count out the importance and long-term impact of any one potential fan. Like I said, you have to cover all your bases. You have to do everything you possibly can to hold people's attention while you've got it. Because here's something that a lot of you might not like to hear, and you might even think I'm being overly pessimistic, but it's true. Nintendo is riding high right now, but there's no guarantee it will last forever. I'm by no means suggesting that I think another failure is likely. I think Nintendo has changed for the better in many ways over the last few years, and I am not expecting another dramatic dip in relevance, and of course, I certainly don't want to see another one. But you gotta be realistic. Nintendo's whole history has been a series of ups and downs. They saw crazy success with the NES, but then all their home consoles after that declined in sales before spiking up with the Wii, then plummeting to an all-time low with the Wii U, then shooting back up again with the Switch. Their handheld sales have always been good, and that could be one of the reasons their home console handheld hybrid is performing so well. But you can't deny their tumultuous history. You can't rule out the idea that they just might make another gigantic mistake and completely misread their audience. Actually, sometime back, a few of the Nintendo guys were discussing the Switch's eventual successor and talking about how they were looking into completely reinventing the controller as we know it, and it scared me. I'm all for innovation when it really works, but this is some scary talk. A newfangled controller that complicates everything and reduces the comfort factor drastically and completely destroys third-party support thanks to compatibility issues is exactly the sort of thing that could tank them again. They've got something in their hands that's pretty much perfect, but will their drive to reinvent the wheel someday compromise it? My point is that right now, they've got the world's attention for the first time in years. The Wii had everyone's attention, but as I've said before, so much of that audience was non-gamers. People who aren't still playing Nintendo games today. You could argue that right now, Nintendo is more relevant and successful in terms of reaching their intended audience of actual gamers than they have been in decades. Maybe even since their early console days. I mean, they've got a theme park going up. They got Super Bowl ads. They got Reggie showing off the Switch on Conan. Mario and Zelda and Smash and Splatoon are selling like mad. They're becoming a household name again. They're making products that kids are putting on their Christmas lists again. The iron is hot. It's burning, blazing red hot, and Nintendo needs to strike it. And it's one thing to strike that iron by pumping out great new games. That's probably the toughest part, but they're doing it just fine. They've no doubt made new fans of Mario and Zelda and Smash, and they're sure as heck about to make new fans of Animal Crossing. Compared to creating brand new entries in Legacy series, digitally releasing ports of older games should be child's play. Sure, maybe it's not as easy as snapping your fingers and having 100% of it ready right at launch, but a year and a half to get NES games? A year after that to get SNES games, but only a few dozen of them, with more coming we don't even know when or for how long? What are they waiting for? All the old games they're just sitting on could be priming people for upcoming and even future releases. And at this point, it doesn't even matter if they come in the form of one-time purchases or subscription perks. A Virtual Console style port is still a great, low-cost way to try out a series before making the plunge on a newer game. Maybe you spend $10 on the original Luigi's Mansion to see if you like the gameplay, and then you decide it's worth spending $60 on 3. And I have some reservations about the subscription model versus actually getting to quote-unquote own my games, but I can't deny the power of a free game. If a person pays a yearly fee and has access to all this old stuff, they're gonna be way more likely to try something new. And that right there could be the singular difference between them sleeping on a series forever or becoming a new fan forever. I've often complained that Nintendo's Virtual Console pricing was too high, so giving us this kind of access is actually a very progressive thing for them to do. The fact that they're easing up on the insistence that we need to pay cold, hard cash for 30-year-old games means their perspective on those games is finally changing. And if they're finally seeing old games not just as ways to make extra money, but also as marketing tools to get us into their IPs, then obviously that's very wise of them, and that's exactly what I'm saying they should do. They just need to go that extra mile. Or like 20 miles. They need to give us access to the rest of the first-party SNES library, and the N64s, and the GameCubes, and the Wiis, and the Game Boys, and the GBAs, and everything that would work on the system. A reminder that I'm not talking about every game ever. I don't mean they should be porting over thousands and thousands of games. I mean all of Nintendo's first-party titles. Or every compatible one at least. If there are control issues like Wii games needing the IR sensor, work it out. Use the gyro instead. The final Wii U games that haven't gotten ports, get them over here already. You got people waiting to play them. Are all these games being priced individually or put on the service, or maybe a combination? Up through N64 on NSO, but the rest sold alone? I don't even care at this point, honestly, just make it happen. I get that it all takes time, but I absolutely know, with no doubt in my mind, that they can do better than what they've been doing. They can do better than 2.5 years to bring us the first batch of SNES games. I also know that what I'm proposing might take a sizable money investment as well, but to that I will always say, it's Nintendo. They're making tons of money now, and they've got obscene amounts of money already in the bank. They can make this happen without even feeling the effect on their wallets, especially if it means their wallets are going to be even fuller later on because of it. One thing I feel that I should address. One could argue, as I actually have before myself, that maybe Nintendo's hesitating on the classic releases because they want to leave their options open for more remasters and remakes. Maybe they don't want to keep giving me Super Mario 64 because someday they might want to do a full remake. Maybe they don't want a port of Metroid Prime Trilogy to interfere with sales of the HD version they may or may not have in development. To this I say, that is not something they should be worrying about, and it's certainly not something to inhibit potential fan conversions over. Just look at Sony. People bought Shadow of the Colossus on the PS2. Then they bought the HD version on the PS3. Then the devs did a major remaster, redoing all the assets and basically making it look like a ground-up PS4 game, and guess what? People bought that too. If it's a game they like, people will buy it, especially if it's something they're going to want to carry with them forever, which, oh look at that, is the case for a very large percentage of Nintendo's library. Those games are dear to people all over the world. If you port it, they will come. If you remaster or remake it, they will come. I guarantee the sales of Link's Awakening on the 3DS did not dramatically affect the sales of the remake on Switch. And if I might indulge in another comparison, look at Microsoft. The Xbox One stumbled out of the gate this generation with some heavy anti-consumer practices and an absolute dearth of compelling exclusives. Phil Spencer has since swooped in and really turned things around. It was too late to catch up to the PS4, but they've spent the last few years doing something even more important for the long term, drumming up goodwill and trying to get as many people as they can invested in the Xbox ecosystem. I can't give you numbers, but based on what they've been doing, I would not be surprised if they're making little to no money with the Xbox One right now. They're offering an absurd number of games through Game Pass, which is only $10 a month, and they're even including some of their new games. Instead of spending $60 on Gears of War 5, someone could easily pay $10 for Game Pass, play the game, and cancel immediately having only spent that $10. And people who already have Game Pass essentially got Gears 5 for no extra money at all. Why would Microsoft do that? Why would they squander such a great chance to recoup some money? Probably because they realize that right now, making money isn't the most important thing for them. Right now, the most important thing is preparing for the next Xbox by throwing out content everywhere, giving people cheap access to tons and tons of games, because by the time the Scarlet comes around, they're gonna have a lot of people wanting to stay hooked into that ecosystem and a lot of newly converted fans who are suddenly frothing at the mouth to pay full price for Gears of War 6. This is obviously a very different scenario from Nintendo's. The Xbox One has struggled, whereas Nintendo is sitting pretty with the Switch. But I hope you can see how, when you're a big company, sometimes exposing people to your games is really the most important thing, almost regardless of how you're charging for them. When you're looking at the long term, sometimes you have to be strategic. Nintendo's problem is that the subscription model is likely their way of thinking about the long term, and I love that they're thinking about the long term, but they're not thinking long enough, or term enough, something. They're not looking at the potential they're missing out on right now as I'm saying this. Heck, that's the thing about the Switch's success versus the Xbox One's relative failure. Nintendo could be utilizing all their old games to make new fans for their future games, and all the while, their new games would keep making money like they have been this whole time. Nintendo's raking in the dough right now, and in this scenario, they would continue to do so while also sowing into their future. They've already thought ahead, and they've already changed their outlook on how old games should be priced, so they're partway there, and they just need to take those extra steps to create a Nintendo ecosystem that is complete and constantly creating new fans of all different series. And I know I waited until the end of this absurdly long video to make this point, but it just might be the best one I've got, so hear me out. This whole thing could go well beyond just making new fans. Who knows how such a thing might affect Nintendo's own views on their IPs? What if a game performed badly at the time of its release, release for various reasons, not the least of which being the fact that the gaming landscape was very, very different back then and still changes constantly. And that poor performance prompted Nintendo to shelve the series indefinitely. But then one day, some giant YouTuber makes a video about how awesome and underappreciated the game is, and suddenly you've got 500,000 people wanting to play it. Outcome 1, their only option is to hunt down a GameCube and a used copy of the game, so very few of them do, and the price of the game skyrockets and Nintendo makes literally zero profit on anything. Outcome 2, everyone boots up their Switches, buys the game, downloads it, and starts playing it in a matter of minutes. All at once, this is a viable series and a sequel seems like a terrific idea. I know this is another extreme example, but understand that more than ever, Nintendo has the opportunity to judge the viability of a game or franchise far beyond the scope of its initial release and within the context of this crazy old unpredictable internet age we live in. Before now, they relied entirely on initial sales, even though the market they deal in has always been extremely volatile and several different factors might have affected those sales. Remember when the internet and YouTube weren't things? Yeah, I do. Remember when only a tiny fraction of the population played video games at all? I do. Sales numbers from back then mean almost nothing now. But a full and constant library of legacy content would give Nintendo a much clearer view of what works and what doesn't at all times. If they put all 5 Paper Mario games on their service and see that millions of people are playing the first 3 and no one's even touching the other 2, suddenly they've got a better idea of what they should be doing with Paper Mario than ever, without having to sift through internet drama and industry context from years and years ago. Heck, they could even implement a platform-wide rating system so they know exactly how much people are enjoying their games and when, and they can track trends and pinpoint lucrative opportunities with precision. This really might be my best argument in favor of Nintendo opening the floodgates on their content. If anything, this would be a great reason for them to just make it happen already. Because Nintendo's in a very unusual position as a game company. Like I said before, no one can hold a candle to their legacy. No other company has access to so many franchises, and not all of them have the ability to create games with such crazy staying power as Nintendo's. I like plenty of non-Nintendo games, but the vast majority of my list of games I will love forever and want to keep playing, like maybe at least once every few years or something, is made up of Nintendo titles. I don't understand it. It's something about the charm, the design, so many things. It's the Nintendo magic. And I know a lot of people feel the same way. Put all my own wants aside for a moment. For Nintendo to not be fully capitalizing on that legacy of theirs is a business sin. The Switch is Nintendo's first hugely successful gamer-focused home console-ish system to come out in ages. They've got people by the millions picking up Nintendo systems for the first time in a long while, or even ever, and they're looking for all the best Nintendo games to play. They're looking to catch up on what they've been missing all these years. Nintendo's got a very special opportunity on their hands, and they just need to get off their tushies and seize it. Pardon my French. Sorry, I was worked out. Woof, I am tired of talking. Honestly, after all that, I don't have much in the way of an outro. This is a topic I feel very strongly about, but I would love to know what you think. Did any of this make sense? Or am I looking way too far into things? Maybe I should just lay off the industry analysis and stick to complaining about art styles. Whatever the case, you have yourself a wonderful, beautiful, glorious day.